Like, what are the implications of the sanctions that we're watching play out right now?
Well, look, as far as the broader, big picture, long-term implications and what it really portends for the dollar, because I've thought the dollar's days as the primary reserve currency were numbered anyway. But this simply highlights the risks that other countries take by basically relying on the US dollar and turning over the global financial system to the US and just kind of allowing the dollar to sit at the top of this system, which gives tremendous power to the United States, not only in that Americans get to live well beyond their means. We could print money and buy stuff, and it's a lot harder to make stuff than print money. I mean, anybody can print money as long as people are willing to accept it, but producing goods, quality goods, requires a lot of resources. You need capital, which means you need savings, you need skilled workers. So a lot goes into that, and all we do is just create numbers on a computer, and we get to enjoy all these goods. Our trade deficits right now are just through the roof. They are all-time record highs. We're doing over $100 billion a month in merchandise trade deficits. None of this would be possible but for the dollar's reserve currency status. But right now, you have a situation where Russia is being punished. Whether they deserve to be punished or not is a completely different argument. I'm not trying to defend what Putin is doing. I'm just pointing out that if you're another country, or you're China, for example, and you're looking at the way Russia is being punished, and you're thinking, I don't want to be in that situation. I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to tie a noose around my neck and throw the other end to the U.S. and hope they don't yank it. So China's probably thinking, we need to get rid of a lot of these U.S. dollars. We need to hurry up and get away from this system, get away from all of these transactions that are in U.S. dollars, so we're not dependent on that ability to access these networks. And the Chinese are sitting on trillions of dollars in reserves, a lot of it invested in U.S. treasuries. I mean, what if the U.S. government decides that it doesn't like something that China's doing, and we're not going to pay you, we're going to default on the treasuries that you own, or we're going to freeze your assets. So I think this is just going to accelerate the movement out of the dollar, which is going to bring forward the huge problem. Jerome Powell mentioned the other day at his hearings in front of Congress. Somebody asked him, what would it mean for the U.S. if the dollar was no longer the world reserve currency? And his response was, well, you'd barely notice the difference, which shows you how little he understands the benefits that are derived to the United States from enjoying that privilege, and how dramatically our standard of living would collapse if that privilege were to be withdrawn. They should have done the opposite. They should have recognized a contraction in economic activity required a contraction in money supply, so that prices would be stable, and so that we would encourage people to consume more while they were producing less. We needed people who were less productive to reduce their consumption. We needed to sacrifice in order to win a war against a virus, the way we've sacrificed in the past to win other wars. Or we should have found another way another way to do it. I mean, if we weren't willing to pay the cost, then we shouldn't have had the lockdowns. We should have found a different approach to dealing with the health threat. But if we wanted to do it the way we did, if we wanted to send everybody home and have nobody go to work and nobody produce, then we had to accept the fact that a severe recession was going to accompany that, and not try to have our cake and eat it too, and say, hey, nobody's going to work, we're all going to stay home, but we're not going to have a recession because we're going to print all this money and let everybody go and spend it. That was the worst possible combination of policies, and I was very critical of it when it happened, and now we're just seeing the beginning of the results. This isn't the end. We're going to see much bigger increases in consumer prices in 2022 than we saw in 2021, and we're going to see probably even bigger increases in 2023. I mean, this is the tip of an iceberg.
All right. So if we look at what they did in March, April, May, and all the way through 2020 into 2021, we now are seeing the impacts of that, to your point. 40-year high in inflation, yada, yada, yada. When we start to
More
look
than
at
40. It's because they're not measuring it right. We're not using the same CPI we used 40 years ago.
Of course. Now,
Right.
if we look at what's going on in terms of these sanctions, I think a very similar type of framework is playing out, where we're trying to mitigate short-term pain at the expense of long-term implications. And so what those long-term implications are, you described. Help me understand when we start to also think not just of the currencies, but it seems like we've made in the past short-term decisions at the expense of long-term implications around oil and natural gas. And we now have seen the United States and many other countries give up energy independence or slow down their pursuit of energy independence for environmental reasons or elsewhere. And now it seems like Russia is in a very unique position. They're the third largest oil producer in the world. They produce 17% of all natural gas in the world. And at the same time that we are trying to sanction them and be quite abrasive from an economic and monetary standpoint, we're still having to buy much of their oil and natural gas because all of these countries are dependent on it. What do you think happens to oil prices and gasoline in the United States or other consumption globally for that type of commodity?
Well, prices are going up. I've been saying this for years. We've been underinvesting. And, the politicians have been trying to push us into this green direction prematurely. I mean, you have to let the free market dictate the type of energy that you're going to use. And if you're trying to force uneconomical forms of energy on the public, there are going to be ramifications. Now, certainly in the long run, humanity is not going to exist on fossil fuels forever, right? At some point, we won't use them at all. But I don't know when that point is. But I know that we're nowhere near it now. I know that the science and technology hasn't advanced to the point that we can move away from it. But, at one point, all of our fuel was coming from whales, right? How would we get oil? We were harpooning whales, right? So, but we got oil and natural gas. We didn't have to do that anymore. So that was a big positive, I think. Most people don't want to go back to the days of whaling to try to get light. But at some point, there's going to be more stuff in solar and wind, or who knows what they're going to do. But right now, oil and gas, coal, those type of fuels are still the most economical ways of generating the power that we need. And to the extent that we haven't been developing it as much as other countries, that is a problem, and the governments have created these barriers. And that the result of that is a lower standard of living. If we're going to go for the Green New Deal or anything like that, the public has to know that there's a huge cost associated with that. You can't just, they try to market it as if it's going to be great news. We're going to have this Green New Deal and everybody's going to be better off. No, everybody's going to be worse off. That's the trade-off. You want to go green, you're going to go poor because you're not going to have the standard of living that you have when we're not green. But, the real problem is not going to be these prices going up as far as inflation is concerned. I mean, the big increase we're seeing in food and energy prices, this is going to cause a recession. This doesn't cause inflation because as food prices go up, as energy prices go up, consumers have to spend more of their incomes on those necessities. They don't stop eating. They still need to heat their homes, electrify their homes. They need to drive. So money is going to be spent, at the supermarket, but that money can't be spent someplace else. And it's the reduction in other spending that ends up causing recession. Then, of course, the Federal Reserve responds to that by printing more money, and that's where the inflation comes from. Not from the isolated increase in certain prices, but from the fact that the Federal Reserve will end up compensating for that. In fact, in many cases, what happens is oil prices go up, food prices go up, and the Federal Reserve thinks, we need to print more money so people can afford to pay those higher prices. And so, but now that drives the prices even higher because we don't need more money, we need more food, we need more energy. But the Federal Reserve doesn't create any of that, it just prints money.